Hey kids, it's Erin with Stationery HQ. I've gotten a lot of questions lately about how to design for wrapping paper. Not just how to set up a file. We have a video on YouTube of how to set a file up for printing wrapping paper, but really how to design for it. It's a lot different than designing a card because you're working on a much bigger art file size. So my very first and most important tip is size matters. So when you're working on your pattern and you're looking at it on your desktop, you've got this big art file that's shrunk down so that you can see the whole thing on your monitor. So the elements that you have in there are going to look tiny, and you might even be tempted to make them bigger. And because you're creating a pattern, it can be a lot of work to repeat something tiny, but that's part of the deal with designing for wrapping paper. So I recommend that if you have a little desktop printer, you print out one section of your design at 100%, or at the very least view it at 100% on your monitor, because you'll probably find that the pattern's much bigger than it should be, because you want for your paper to be able to be used on a lot of different box sizes. And if your pattern is big on a tiny little box, you won't get to see very much of it. So keep that in mind when you're working on your design. The second important thing is working with patterns. Pattern design can be done a lot of different ways. You could go really linear, like the wallpaper behind me. It's one element that's just repeated in one direction, and that's the design, and it's gorgeous. Or if you wanted to make it a pattern that you could use on a box in a portrait format or a landscape format, you could take your elements and do a row where they're facing upright and the next row they're facing upside down, so that no matter how the gift is wrapped, you can still see the element. The third option is a tossed pattern, and this is really common in fabric design, where you take your element and make it in a bunch of different sizes and turned in all different directions, so that no matter how someone sees a box, they'll still see the graphics in your pattern. And a great example of this is in fabric design. So I recommend going to your nearest fabric store and see how designers have done patterns on fabric and see how they appeal to you and how they look. So those are my big tips. Be careful about the size and think hard about the pattern. And the last one is the paper that you choose. We offer matte paper, which is right this second, matte paper is really hot. People are loving matte paper. And we also have gloss, and they both take the color beautifully. They're done on the same press, so the quality is outstanding. Matte paper tends to soak a little bit of the ink in, and so it will look like gloss paper will look just a teeny bit brighter, just barely brighter. So things to consider when you're designing what kind of colors you're using, but fall in love with paper. Try both, order a design in both sheets and see what you like best. Hope that helps.